started we raised our angel round in January 2015. It took us about 5 days, and the team started full-time in March of 2015, and by December the 8th, we published our first streaming app. So I started a music streaming service because I had no idea what I was doing. And in hindsight, if anyone here is considering starting a music startup, don't. Take the money, move to Bali, and learn how to make cocktails. Because I think that would be way more fun. Perhaps not as strong a learning curve, but a lot more fun. So this is my third venture. I was involved in a communications agency to start off with, got into the mobile space, joined a music startup that was funded by Media and Google that was looking at building an app for talent discovery in Africa. And they were effectively looking at musicians, filmmakers, poets, songwriters, etc., who wanted to be self-published. And the company was called Boza. And while there, being Afrikaans myself, I realized that there is a very strong link between music and culture, more so in emerging markets than in Europe, from my experience. And there's actually someone in the audience here called Bosun, who I spent a lot of time working with. He's not very embarrassed. In Nigeria, specifically looking at how do we bring those artists into the fold, and how do we help them become discovered, and how do we bring brands into that fold and help them earn revenue. So unfortunately, the startup I was involved in, which is where the learning comes in, couldn't really get their tech out the door. And as a result, I left. And I remember very clearly being at Outside Lands, hanging out with some of the guys from Gracenote, and I said, I think there's a different way to run streaming services. And so listening to Sammy earlier, it's really interesting, because a lot of the stuff we've based our entire business on is data. So in an emerging market, I think when you guys start talking about mobile and beacons and Oculus Rift, and I'm like, seriously? No one in Africa is going to be using Oculus Rift for the next 20 years, let alone beacons. So smartphone penetration hasn't even kind of reached that stage where you can say that everybody can actually even use data. So it's an interesting space to play in, because for us it's a lot more about the online to offline play. So for example, one of the things we've built into NicheStreem is the ability that we can work with big brands, effectively sponsor artists. So imagine there's an artist who's known for cooking, in her spare time. We can bring a spice company on board, help her curate a playlist sponsored by that specific brand. Every user that listens to that playlist on the app gets served a mobile voucher. And next time they walk into a store, they get a 10% discount on that spice. And so there are other ways of helping those artists earn revenue that isn't necessarily just about ticket sales or merchandise, but really about looking at where do brands and artists and users interact. So maybe I'll tell you a little more about what NicheStream is and start there. If you look at a cable TV network, it's effectively one backend, and every single channel on that network is curated with a specific audience in mind, specific content, specific branding. Yet, music streaming services expect you to land on a homepage and want everything, all in one go. So I'm convinced that no one listens to 33 million tracks, open to anyone who wants to prove me otherwise. But I think people listen to the music they love repeatedly. So I'm Afrikaans, it's the third largest spoken language in South Africa. We have 11 official languages, so wrap your head around that. And Afrikaans music makes up 58% of domestic music sales. And big shows, there's actually a show called Afrikaans is Groot, which means Afrikaans is big. They sell 90,000 tickets in a morning, and they put out 2 tweets. So these are artists who, if they're featured on Spotify or Deezer or Apple Music, they never, ever, ever get seen. Because Afrikaans music gets lumped into one playlist, even though it runs from rap music like Die Antwoord, right through to Caroline van Jaarsveld, who does love ballads. But it's Afrikaans music, so it's world music. These artists never get any payouts from that because they're competing with Adele and Justin Bieber and everyone else. So for these artists, in fact, about 420 of them that we've reached out to, they've never ever been told what a streaming service is. They don't know how to earn money from it, they don't know what it means, their labels don't share with them what that information is. And so we said, well, why don't we do what the cable TV networks do? Build one scalable backend and effectively brand and curate specific niche streams on top of that. So Likkie, which means song in Afrikaans, is our first streaming service. We've published a web widget, an Android app, and we are literally launching iPhone in about 2 weeks' time. And we feature just Afrikaans artists. So playlisting, activity, genre, mood, you name it. These artists are the star of the actual app. And for us, it becomes really interesting because our territory is restricted, our licensing is limited, our costs are so much lower. We've built an entire streaming service for 250,000 US. And what I'm talking about here is an entire Java stack backend that we can replicate and build a new stream in 3 months' time. So these artists are super happy because they're effectively getting a much bigger payout from a smaller pool, but they can move the needle. And so for us, Afrikaans is a proof of concept. And the learning that I've gone through just as kind of the CEO of this is, I had to learn what publishing is, I had to learn what licensing is, I had to move dinosaurs like Sony and Universal 1 centimeter to the left and go, please, can we just license this teeny tiny catalog? And we've had to literally convince them that they can surface back catalog and they can get more out of the artists if we curate at a very specific vertical level. So I was talking to Georgia, I'm not sure if she's in the audience earlier, and she said, oh, they want to start a music streaming service, but they have to find a CTO. So the blonde is fake, but I remember very clearly walking in and meeting with my CTO for the first time, and I went, okay, so we want to build a streaming service, and it needs to be on iOS, and can you do that? And he looked at me and he's like, okay. So this dude starts building with me, and what I've learned from technology, microservices and failovers and Amazon Web Services and plugins on clients and billing and you name it, it's been phenomenal. But I think the biggest learning for us has been we don't know what we don't know. And so when I say move to Bali, I'm kind of being a little facetious because I think there's a lot, I think there's a lot that you can gain from running a startup, not just in terms of plugging into the ecosystem and understanding that it runs from rights organizations to dev guys to how to use Slack just to put your team together. There's an enormous ecosystem here that, maybe because we're on the tip of Africa, we don't realize it, but people are really, really supportive. And I think the best thing is just to be open about knowing what you don't know and literally saying, there is a way to run this differently. There's a way to do things that have been done, but that can potentially be done better. And, Chris and Felix and these guys, I think have done such a phenomenal job about putting people into a room, from artists to guys who want to do their own startups, who effectively, this is the space that you can learn in. And I hope that you get out of that what, I did, which is these conferences brought together an advisory panel, CTOs, licensing guys, etc. And pretty scary, but it's worth it. So, thanks.